Greetings, book lovers! Welcome to the first edition of Literature Lovers Around the Globe, a series of international conferences organized for the biggest fans of English literature out there. As you may know, these gatherings were at first conceived as on-site congresses, but due to COVID-19, we've decided to adapt the format and hold the conferences online, reaching out to as many book lovers as possible. This week's period is the 18th century, the time of Augustian poetry, journalism, criticism, and the beginnings of the novel. My name is Leire Gómez, and on this third day, I'll introduce you to Jane Austen and one of her finest novels, if not the best, Persuasion. First, I'm going to give you a short reminder of the author's life and works. Then we'll see a short video summarizing the plot, and finally, I'll answer some of the questions you left me on my Twitter account. Without further ado, let us begin. First of all, who is Jane Austen? Well, there is not much biographical information about her, apart from a few surviving letters from her and some notes her family left. You can see a list of her most relevant data right here. Her date of birth, education, residences, her date of death, and her main relationships. Although she never got married, she did have a brief love affair with Thomas Lefroy, a neighbor, whom she met when she was 20. We can discern from her letters to Cassandra, her sister, that both of them were very fond of each other, and he is even rumored to have proposed to her. Unfortunately, they did not marry, for none of them had a stable financial situation at the time. For those who have already read Persuasion, this might sound quite familiar. As for her style, she is a nudity for her time, and she is closer to early 18th century authors rather than her contemporaries who wrote very sentimental novels. If I had to describe her style in 4 words, I would say it is moderate, proper, realistic, and reasonable. Actually, her works can even be seen as a precursor to the 19th century realism. You can also see a list of her novels. All of them were published anonymously, of course, and some of them even posthumously, which means after her death. The most notorious one is probably Pride and Prejudice, but Emma, Sense and Sensibility, and obviously Persuasion are also widely known. And now we're going to watch a video quickly summarizing the story and the essential components of Persuasion for those who have not read the novel yet. Spoiler warning! Leave the session now and come back in 5 minutes if you don't want to know how it ends. Baronet Walter Elliot of Kellynch Hall, a very handsome and self-centered widower, has 3 daughters. Elizabeth, the eldest, is just like him, vain and conceited. She will only accept the best, spends money carelessly, and she is satisfied being the lady of the house. Sir Walter wanted to marry her to his nephew William Elliot, he's here, but he married another woman, and now she is in danger of becoming a spinster. Mrs. Clay, a good friend of hers, is flattering her with the secret intention of marrying Sir Walter, but Elizabeth is unaware of this, and puts her behind her sister Anne. Anne, our heroine, is the middle daughter. Her beauty is not as obvious as Elizabeth, and she is soft, kind, and selfless. She's the only one who cares for the family and tries to rule the house in a sensible way. 7 years ago, she was proposed by Commander Frederick Wentworth, but Sir Walter, Elizabeth, and the family friend and motherly figure for Anne, Lady Russell, said his social status was too low for her, and persuaded her to break their engagement. She was weak, but she hasn't forgotten him. The youngest daughter, Mary, has been married with Charles Northbourne for 3 years already, and lives with his family in Uppercross Hall. She always claims everyone's attention, and doesn't doubt to call for Anne. They always help her whenever she needs her. Money, the ever-relevant element in Austen's world, is going to change our characters' lives. Sir Walter's habit of having a life of luxury in accord with his position, regardless of his funds, has driven him into debt. Therefore, he decides to rent Kellynch Hall and move to Bath, to Anne's dismay. The city lacks the dignity of her family home. On the other hand, Elizabeth sees this as a chance for social improvement and new relationships, since Bath was a fashionable destination for the high class. While Sir Walter, Elizabeth, and Mrs. Clay move to Bath, they leave Anne back, dealing with the practical details. She also visits the Musgroves, who are very fond of her, as Mary requires her assistance once again. Mrs. Grove, the Kellynch Hall tenant, is visited by her brother, who is none other than Wentworth, who is now a wealthy and eligible captain in the navy. When he visits the Musgroves, he reincarnates Anne, but he despises her because she was persuaded against him in the past. To Anne's consternation, he starts to court Louisa, Charles' young sister, as he has not forgiven Anne yet. In a retreat to Lyme Regis, Louisa tries to jump off a set of stairs, but hits her head badly. All the witnesses panic, but Anne manages to keep her head cool and organizes a group to aid the girl and call for a surgeon. Thanks to this accident and her general behavior, Wentworth starts to value and think high of Anne again. Anne goes to Bath, where she meets her father, older sister, and also her cousin Mr. Elliot, who is now a widower and has reconciled with Sir Walter. Elizabeth believes he's come to win her back, but he begins to court Anne instead. Even so, Anne feels that there is something off about him. When Wentworth comes to town, he feels jealous of Mr. Elliot. Anne visits her friend Mrs. Smith and finds out she was right about Mr. Elliot. He's a cold-hearted opportunist who is responsible for her tight financial situation and was a terrible husband to his first wife. More so, he's also trying to prevent Mrs. Clay from marrying Sir Walter, as if they happened to have a son, he wouldn't be the baronet's heir anymore. In the end, he takes Mrs. Clay as his mistress and goes back to London. The manipulative social climber falls victim to the calculator schemer. As for Anne, she meets the Musgroves in the Bath Hotel. Wentworth is also there, and after hearing a conversation between his fellow officer Harville and Anne, Wentworth realizes she's still in love with him, just as he is with her. He confesses his feelings in a letter, and they renew their engagement. Even Lady Russell approves of them now. In the end, the good souls get rewarded, while the mean ones, even if not satisfied, aren't as punished by the author as they could have been. After all, real life is not perfect either. Wow, that was a lot of information to process. I hope you could follow it without any problems. Now that we all have a general idea of the story of Anne Elliot, let's move on to the next section. When I was asked to talk about Persuasion, I prepared the video you just saw, but then I realized that maybe you could have more specific questions about it. So I came up with an idea. I requested on my Twitter account, yes, that you send me any inquiries regarding this novel. This way, I can give you the information you really want. I received hundreds of comments, so thank you so much to all those who participated. First, we have user The Kid on the Back Road, who asks, Lol, I read this in class and it was super confusing. What's it really about? Well, I think the previous video already answered your question, but if I had to list down the main themes of the novel, they would be the importance of remaining firm and having conviction. Anne loves Wentworth, and she knows it, and she even knows that marrying him is the best option for her. But she lets herself be persuaded by her relatives and Lady Russell. Jane Austen is also trying to tell us that second chances are possible. Life can take many unexpected turns, and one situation might improve with time. Anne believes she isn't going to get a second chance in love like with Wentworth. But her time to shine is over, but her maturity actually grew over the years, which makes her very agreeable to those around her. This way, she catches the attention of not one or two, but three men. And last but not least, Jen is also telling us that solid and consistent is way better than banal and apparent. In other words, despite her lasting beauty, Elizabeth is not as appealing as Anne in the end, because she is not as authentic. External beauty goes down with time, while inner beauty can only increase. Then we have user anonymous female 19th century novelist, who asks, Anne reminds me a lot of Elizabeth Bennet. Rejects suitor, regrets it, and boom, marries him. Are all of Jane Austen's protagonists the same? For those who don't know, Elizabeth Bennet is the main character of Pride and Prejudice. Well, not exactly. There are quite a few differences between Jane Austen's main characters. Emma Woodhouse, who you can see on the far right, for instance, is nothing like Anne. She meddles in other people's business all the time, whereas Anne will never boss anyone around. Well, except when the situation really calls for it, like with Lisa's accident. As for Elizabeth Bennet, who is right here, it is true that both her and Anne reject and later on accept a suitor. But if we consider Lizzie, although exemplary Jane Austen main character, then we have to say that Anne is quite unique in comparison to her. Unlike Lizzie, she is a novel. She is not so young anymore, and most importantly, we don't see her falling in love with Wentworth. Her story is not about infatuation, but about healing past wounds and making amends, and that's really important. And finally, we have this last comment. I reserved the best for the last. Because, well, here we have Fitzwilliam Darcy, yes, Mr. Darcy in person, writing me a comment. I feel really honored, Mr. Darcy. Well, he asks, in the end, what do you think is more important for Jane Austen, money or love? And that's a great question, and it's very funny that it comes from you. The answer is common sense. Austen knew how the society of her time worked. Everybody everyone was walking around with a price tag on them, like you right here. And there was this general need for social climbing, which is not so different from our current society. That's actually what makes Austen such a popular author. She shows us human nature at its finest. There are no big dramas in her novels, only domestic problems. Ultimately, Austen's opinion on money and marriage is based on rational thinking and practicality. Marrying without love is nonsense. But getting married just out of love is reckless, as economic stability is also important. Money and love hold the key to a successful marriage in the end. Well, this was a short but intense conference. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I hope I got you interested in Persuasion if you haven't read it yet, or that maybe you want to reread it now that you know all of this information. Remember that tomorrow will be the conference on Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe. Thank you all for attending to this session, and remember to keep reading. Bye!